Johnnie Moore, it is wonderful to connect with you. You are now leading the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as executive chairman. For those who do not know the work that your organization is doing, tell us a little bit about it.
Actually, it's quite simple. There's one mission, which is to make sure Gazans have the food that they need. Our job is just to feed Gaza. But we're also, in feeding Gazans, trying to address a systemic issue, which is that almost all of the humanitarian aid that has been going into Gaza for as long as anybody can remember has been under the total control of Hamas. So routinely, we've all seen the videos. UN trucks arrive. Hamas holds at gunpoint the drivers. They take the trucks over. And this food has been used to prolong the war, to all kinds of nefarious purposes. They take the free food and they go sell it to Gazans. And sometimes they use it to recruit fighters. And so we decided, like, this is just unacceptable. There has to be a better way of doing this. And so this is a US-backed effort led by a private organization to try to get free food to Gazans. That's it. That's the mission. That's the only mission.
Simple mission. The complexities, obviously what you just described with the UN, the key question I think people would ask is, why hasn't the UN figured out a better way, another way to get around what you just described?
Yeah, I think the United Nations and a lot of the aid community generally basically long ago decided that this was the cost of doing business. So in order to feed people, you had to just concede that a certain percentage of that food was going to be hoarded by Hamas in a warehouse, or used to recruit fighters, or stolen, or sold in the streets. Like, it was just the cost of doing business. And what we're saying is that's a false choice. There is a different way of doing this. Now, even though the mission is very simple and we're very focused on that mission, Billy, it's also like the single most complicated environment you can possibly imagine to deliver humanitarian assistance. I mean, it is an active war. It is as complex every way you could think of it. And yet, what's amazing is here we are, like several weeks in, and we're pushing 30 million meals. And even as missiles are flying, over Israel from Iran, a whole additional war that's happening, we have been able to continue our operations. And despite a lot of like negative press and a lot of propaganda and disinformation that's coming from Hamas and others, we're hearing from the Gazans themselves, who are thanking us and thanking America. They're grateful for what we're doing. So you would know it by reading a lot of the press, but it's actually working really, really well.
Coming into this role, what have you had to do? First, you obviously have a good command of the region. You've done a lot of work in different capacities there in the Middle East. But what have you had to do to make sure you're acquainted with what is going on so that you can actually come up with a system that works around what we've described, these difficulties, these challenges? Because as you were saying, this is incredibly complex. It is not easy to come up with a plan to make this work.
Well, like everything, I mean, you have to have the right team, and our team is just unbelievable. I mean, the several of the leaders of the operation, one of them has like 30 years of experience with USAID. Another one is a former member of the U.S. Armed Forces, who was basically on the front lines of doing this in the most complex environments in the world. So we have, like, from an operational perspective, we have some of the best people in the world, that from the moment of sort of thinking through this idea to actually implementing it, that's actually not the hard part. Like, these guys know what they're doing, and they've created a system that works. So I'm not coming in as an armchair expert on delivering humanitarian assistance in a war zone. I'm actually coming in to just kind of take the arrows and to provide leadership and to be a spokesperson, in effect, for this effort, because our team is just so unbelievably incredible. I mean, we could not have a better team. All that to say, like, I have spent the last 20 years all over the world and in the Middle East. I've been to the worst humanitarian situations in the world. And, I remember being in Dadaab, which is the large refugee camp, mainly Somalians, in Kenya, 2 days after a terrorist, attack, and walking through and really, really seeing the effects of abject poverty, and sat on boards for many, many years of large humanitarian organizations. So I get it. But the one thing I understand from my experience is you just have to have technical expertise. And what's so profane about the fact that the UN has, like, actively boycotted our efforts, which is nuts, The UN has never boycotted Hamas. Okay, not
So they're
once have
not
they.
supporting, just to clarify, they're not supporting what you're doing whatsoever. They're actually working against what you're doing.
Yeah, it's actually worse than that, Billy. It's not that they're not supporting us, it's that they're actively opposing us. They're rallying people against us. They're parroting Hamas talking points. They're trying to literally destroy us. And then, we had a tragedy that took place when several of our local workers were murdered by Hamas. This happened after a direct threat from Hamas. And so we asked the United Nations to issue a statement condemning the threat. And I told them, I said, like, look, you don't have to endorse what we're doing. You can say we disagree with their approach to aid, but fine, say whatever you want to say about us, but can you please just condemn threatening our local workers? And they wouldn't even do that. And then, by the way, when we actually had people, that were harmed by Hamas, including killed by Hamas, the United Nations to this day still hasn't issued a statement condemning it.
What is it? Well, for what is it that they're opposed to in how you're doing the work that you're doing? What is the thing that has them not only not supporting you, but in your words, actively working against you?
Well, I also want to be clear, like, we're not the ones that are boycotting them. Like right now, I've said it 1,000 times, I say it again, like we're ready to work with them. We want to learn from them. We want to collaborate with them. We want to do good together with them. Our hand is out. We extend it. We want to work together. But ostensibly the reason why they're saying they don't want to work with us is they're saying they don't want to work with us because we violate humanitarian principles of impartiality. Okay, which is just a bunch of hogwash. Impartiality doesn't mean neutrality. Okay, there is right and there's wrong here. Our mission is not a military mission. This is not it had nothing to do with the conflict between these parties. Our mission is to feed people. That's our mission. And in the same token, we can say, like, the way has been working in the past, has only further hurt the Gazans. Like, the first victims of Hamas have always been the Gazan people. The truth is, though, I think there's a ton of corruption in this whole process. I think we have inadvertently peeled back the layer of something we didn't even know was underneath. And I think a lot of people feel threatened by it. We have time for all of that. Okay, we can have our disagreements. What we need now is we need the international community working with us to help these people.
How are you navigating the different parties involved in this? Palestinians, Israel. Are you getting support? How is that working in terms of stakeholders who are involved there, embedded there in that community due to the conflict?
I mean, the Gazans themselves, as I mentioned in passing moments ago, they are so grateful for us. I mean, when we opened up our operation, there was one story that we've all passed amongst ourselves. But there's this older Gazan guy who comes up to us and he actually confirms like 5 times with our local staff, whether the aid is free. He just can't understand that the aid is actually free, because the aid, all that they're getting is being sold to them by Hamas to like prolong the war. So I think everybody actually appreciates what we're doing. And I think the fact that Hamas has opposed us so directly, even threatening us, is probably an indication that what we're doing is correct. Okay. And the truth is, even in the United Nations and the World Food Program, and a lot of these other organizations who I do expect eventually to come around, I don't expect them to come around because they necessarily want to come around. I expect them to come around because the US government's getting totally fed up, and there are going to be consequences if they don't. But inside of these organizations are a lot of regular everyday aid people who love what we're doing, who are on our side, who support what we're doing, and they're putting pressure on the heads of these organizations, that enjoy their lives, and say, like, this is not right. Like, why can't you guys work together?
Well, when you think about Hamas being opposed to what you're doing, you mentioned how grateful the people are. I would imagine if people start to see, oh, Americans are doing this wonderful work, maybe Americans aren't so terrible. Maybe America is actually a great place. If you start having those sorts of heart changes happen, that becomes a threat to Hamas, does it not?
Yeah, and Billy, it of course, as you said earlier, I've spent a lot of time in the region, and I was in Syria actually a few days ago. I met the new leadership of Syria. I know this region really, really well, and people love what America is doing now. America is not meddling and getting involved in every single conflict. America is trying to help, let countries make their decisions and help them become something. And the United States of America is going to be the best partner for the future of the Gazan people. And the Gazan people want that. And Israel knows that. The regional countries know that. The only thing standing in the way many days is a corrupt system. And sometimes that corrupt system involves Hamas's behavior. And sometimes it actually involves the international organizations that were created for this purpose. And I'll tell you, when the missiles started flying between Iran and Israel, there wasn't a single aid organization except for GHF that got a single parcel of food into the Gaza Strip. And we got millions of meals into the Gaza Strip. And we did it with zero help from the organizations that are funded by the world and expected to do these things.
What are some of the other misconceptions? And maybe there aren't any others, but I'd love to give you a chance to clear up what you believe to be misconceptions that people might hold, either in the Middle East or even in the West when it comes to this, obviously the work you're doing, but the broader conflict at the core of it.
I mean, I think one of the misconceptions is that the Gazans are for Hamas. The Gazans are the first victims of Hamas. There are plenty of Gazans that are for sure extremist and that, willingly join Hamas. There are far more Gazans that just want a future for their families, and they're the first victims. Secondly, the Israelis, they want peace in the region. They don't want more war in the region. I mean, this is everything motivated. The people that want this war to end the most are the Israelis. And also, by the way, the broader region is a region that wants a new chapter and a new chapter of peace. And I just believe with all my heart that we're not witnessing a new era of conflict in the Middle East. We're actually witnessing a moment of conflict and an era of peace. We're witnessing the last gasp of all these extremists, and these extremists have often used the international system to their benefit. That's not for this conversation necessarily. It's not our focus at GHF, just an observation I'm making. Our focus at GHF, however, is to do something very, very simple. Food every day for Gazans, and it shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be hard to deliver food when there are barriers to doing something that simple, because it's a simple mission and it is a simple action, but it's not simple when all of the factors around it and the individuals and organizations around it are making it more complicated. Now, if people want to help in some way or be involved or find out more information about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where can they go to do that?
Well, first of all, transparency is a key value. So every single day, we're releasing the receipts. You know how many boxes we distributed, how many meals we provided. We tell you what works and what didn't work. You can pay attention to those updates on X. You can follow me on X, the GHF account on X. Go to ghf.org. Some of that is all being set up. Most of all, just pray for us. I mean, we really need prayer. Like, we need prayer for the safety of people. We need a lot of help in order to keep this going on. I mean, this is not an easy thing to do. It's not an inexpensive thing to do. We need the world to buy into what we're doing.
Well, Johnnie, we will be praying for you. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more Christ-centered journalism.